All right, so lymphatic system part two, body defense against infection. A pathogen is any disease-causing agent, so anything that can cause disease. So it could be bacteria, viruses, parasitic worms. Our innate defenses are general defenses. So innate defenses protect against a variety of pathogens. Adaptive defenses is where we get our immunity from. And these are specific. So these are specific, they are defenses against a specific pathogen or a specific group of pathogens. Adaptive defenses are carried out by lymphocytes. All right, let's talk about the innate defenses first. So the innate defenses, species resistance. Species resistance just means that certain diseases are only certain species are susceptible to certain diseases. So, for example, humans can't get feline leukemia or feline AIDS, let's say. Mechanical barriers, or fever. Fever inhibits microbial growth. And really, well, that and it increases the phagocytic activity. So fever keeps things like bacteria from being able to divide and multiply quickly. And it slows down that reproduction so that the body can beat the bacteria. But the other part with the increasing the phagocytic activity, when you have fever, it causes more blood to flow through your body and calls up other blood supplies. So if you have more blood moving through, you have more white blood cells moving through the body too. Mechanical barriers are exactly what they sound like. So things like your skin keeps out pathogens, keeps bacteria and viruses out as long as it's intact. Mucous membranes, another mechanical barrier, things get stuck to them and they can't get inside of you. Chemical barriers. Chemical barriers are things like pH extremes in the stomach. So in our stomach, we have a very low pH that kills a lot of bacteria and viruses. On our skin, we can have high salt concentrations. Enzymes, we have enzymes in various body fluids like our mouths, our tears, those kinds of things. Other ones, interferons. So the chemical barrier for interferons are released by virally infected cells, and they bind the receptors on the uninfected cells and tell them to block the replication of viruses. So interferons are kind of like a last-ditch signal sent out by the cells that already have the viruses in them to tell the other cells around, hey, don't let these replicate. Defensins, chemicals that they make holes in bacterial cell walls. Let's think of another one. Collectins bind to sugars on pathogens and make them stick together. So those are natural, or those are chemical barriers. The natural killer cells are a type of lymphocyte, and these cause virally infected cells and cancer cells to break open. They use a chemical called perforin. So let's go back to this one. The natural killer cells. So if a cell, if one of our own cells has a virus that's infected, the job of the natural killer cell is to kill that virally infected cells so that the virus can't replicate and make more copies of itself. All right, other innate defenses, inflammation. Inflammation is just our tissue's response to injury. and we've talked about this in the other units, but it helps to prevent the spread of the pathogen. And it also helps to, and it does that by when the area becomes inflamed, the pathogen gets stuck in that very local area. So when this happens, you get the blood vessels dilate, capillaries are leaky, white blood cells are attracted to the area, you get a clot forming. Phagocytes are really active during inflammation. Phagocytosis, this is when cells, our white blood cells, eat the pathogen. So remember, neutrophils, monocytes, macrophages, they just destroy whatever foreign particles there. So those are other innate defenses. All right. All right, our white blood cells. And we've talked about these before. We talked about these in the blood unit. But we've got the leukocytes, which are just white blood cells, and those protect against diseases. The granulocytes, remember, were the neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils. And the agranulocytes were lymphocytes and monocytes. All right, the neutrophils, this is just review from the blood unit, because we've talked about these. Remember, the neutrophils have these segmented nuclei, so that's why they're called polymorphonuclear leukocytes. These are the first ones to arrive at infections, and they make up 54 to 62% of our leukocytes. And these are very elevated during bacterial infections, so these respond to bacterial infections. Basophils are the ones that release heparin and histamine, and heparin causes, histamine causes blood vessels to become leaky, and heparin prevents the blood from clotting. And these make up less than 1% of our leukocytes. These basophils are pretty big. Eosinophils, these are the ones that make up 1 to 3% of our leukocytes. They're elevated during parasitic worm infestations, and they also help to moderate allergic reactions. Eosinophils have like these bilobe nuclei, whereas 2 and maybe connected with a small strand. Monocytes are the largest blood cell. They have this kidney-shaped or oval nuclei. Monocytes just circulate around in the blood, and then when they leave the bloodstream and enter some damaged tissue, then they become macrophages, and really large macrophages. These make up 3% to 9% of our leukocytes. Lymphocytes, these are T cells and B cells. Remember, these ones are about the size of a red blood cell, and their nucleus takes up almost the entire cell, so you have this really thin rim of cytoplasm. These make up 1/4 to 1/3 of all of our leukocytes. So we'll talk more specifically about those in a second. So there we have some neutrophils. You got a basophil there. Neutrophil. Here's an eosinophil. So the neutrophil has this, nuclei that's kind of has many lobes. And then the eosinophil is bilobed and a really thin connection. Okay. So when you try to identify these under a microscope, the granulocytes thing isn't always obvious, but the granulocytes look like they have grains in them. The agranulocytes don't appear to have grains. Size of the nucleus is a big one, and the shape of the nucleus, because the say for the T cells and the B cells, the nucleus takes up almost the entire thing, the entire cell. But for eosinophils, you have that bilobe nucleus. And generally, granulocytes are much larger than the red blood cells. So this upper left one, this kidney-shaped nucleus, that's a monocyte. These ones right here are neutrophils. That's a lymphocyte. That's an eosinophil. Okay. Oh, this one's a basophil. And these ones are platelets. All right, so we'll stop here for this part 2.